Welcome everyone, join us today as we celebrate the life and legacy of Jim Keays, the driving force behind the Masters Apprentices, who helped define the sound of Aussie rock from the 60s into the 70s and beyond. So let's dive in. James Keays, born the 9th of September 1946, in Glasgow, Scotland, in the United Kingdom. Born to an unwed mother and adopted at 6 months by Belfast immigrants James and Jessie, who brought him to South Australia when he was 5. As an only child, he cherished the company of extended family and friends, with gatherings often turning into lively sing-alongs around the piano. Music became an integral part of his life. He attended Burnside Primary and Norwood High School, played Australian rules football and golf, a passion he shared with his father, and first fell in love with rock music at 11 after hearing Little Richard's "Rip It Up" and Jerry Lee Lewis' "Great Balls of Fire." In 1965, 4 Adelaide teenagers, Mick Bauer, Brian Borden, Gavin Webb, and Rick Morrison, from dance band The Mustangs, who played instrumentals in the style of the Shadows and the Ventures. But after the Beatles' 1964 visit to Australia, instrumental bands were quickly becoming outdated. Realizing they needed a new direction, they placed a singer-wanted ad at a local music store. Jim, who was taking bass lessons from John Bywaters, spotted the ad on his third visit, auditioned, and landed the role. The Mustangs built a strong following on Adelaide's dance circuit, playing suburban halls and migrant hostels. Many of their fans were British migrants, bringing first-hand knowledge of UK music trends. The band's next step was a name change, reflecting their admiration for musical masters like Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, and Bo Diddley. Seeing themselves as apprentices to these legends, they chose the Masters Apprentices as a tribute, deliberately omitting the apostrophe. By late 1965, they had become the house band at the Beat Basement, drawing packed crowds and securing a prized Saturday afternoon residency. They also became a major attraction at the Octagon Ballroom in Elizabeth, home turf of the Twilights and a hub for young British migrants. Among their regular audience members were future rock stars John Swanee Swan and his younger brother Jimmy Barnes. Around this time, they also played a dance in Salisbury promoted by a young Bernard Doc Neeson, who would later front the Angels. By early 1966, the Masters Apprentices had become one of Adelaide's top beat bands, regularly selling out shows in the city and touring regional towns like Murray Bridge, Mount Gambier, and Whyalla. Their first TV appearance was on a Good Friday telethon hosted by Adelaide TV personality Ernie Sigley. That year, they entered the South Australian heat of Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds, finishing third behind the Twilights, who later won the national title. Later in 1966, they played a gig with Melbourne pop star Bobby Bright, of Bobby and Laurie, who was impressed and recommended them to his label, Astor Records. Not long after, Astor requested a 4-track demo. While recording at a local 2-track studio, the band realized they only had 3 suitable songs. To fill the gap, guitarists Bauer and Morrison quickly wrote Undecided in about 15 minutes and recorded it just as fast. The song's fuzzy guitar tone was an accident, caused by a faulty valve in Bauer's amplifier, but they liked the sound and kept it. A few weeks later, Jim was at a drive-in with his girlfriend when the final track suddenly blasted from his car radio. In August 1966, the band made their Melbourne debut, impressing audiences at the city's top discotheques. Their first single, Undecided, and Wars or Hands of Time, was released in October and gained traction in Adelaide thanks to strong local radio support. Written by Bauer, Wars or Hands of Time is notable as the first Australian pop song to address the Vietnam War, a pressing issue following the introduction of conscription in 1965. Jim, whose birthday the 9th of September was drawn in the 1966 draft ballot, avoided conscription by joining the Citizens Military Force, CMF, later the Army Reserve. To keep his long hair, his girlfriend cleverly pinned it under his slouch hat during CMF sessions. By late 1966, the Masters were gaining momentum. Melbourne DJ Stan the Man Rofe championed their single Undecided, and Jim formed a lifelong friendship with Ian Molly Meldrum, who helped promote the band through Go Set. They built a strong following with TV appearances on Commotion and The Go Show, playing alongside top acts like the Purple Hearts, The Loved Ones, and The Group. Returning to Adelaide, they recorded the proto-punk classic Buried and Dead, their second single. Realizing their future lay in Melbourne, they relocated in early 1967. Despite rising popularity, they struggled financially, often relying on friends for accommodation and food. Their self-titled debut album, released in June, was a landmark, one of the first Australian LPs to feature mostly original material. By mid-1967, the Masters embraced psychedelic influences, evident in Buried and Dead and culminating in Mick Bauer's Living in a Child's Dream. Released in August, it became one of their biggest hits, reaching number 9 on the charts and winning Australian Song of the Year. Jim, a natural frontman, designed their flamboyant stage outfits, often shopping in Miss Myer and women's fashion departments to sidestep conservative menswear. The band's skyrocketing fame brought pressures. Lead guitarist Rick Morrison, who had a collapsed lung, passed out on stage and had to quit, replaced by Tony Summers. Meanwhile, non-stop touring, sometimes 15 gigs a week, took its toll. While touring Queensland for Ivan Damon's Sunshine Organisation, Jim met Johnny O'Keefe, who called the Masters the most Australian new band in the country. In July, they finished runners-up in the Hoadley's National Battle of the Sounds, solidifying their place in Australian rock history. In September, during their first Tasmanian tour, Mick Bauer suffered a breakdown from mounting pressure. Found in distress before a Hobart gig, he was forced on stage but stood motionless, unable to perform. Hospitalized and diagnosed with nervous exhaustion, he was ordered to quit performing. His departure, akin to Syd Barrett's exit from Pink Floyd, left the band in turmoil. Bauer had written all their singles and album originals, making his loss a severe blow. With Jim stepping up as leader, they pressed on, recruiting guitarist Rick Harrison. Ironically, as they struggled internally, Living in a Child's Dream soared up the charts. As Jim put it, nothing was together, and everything was working. At a free Hyde Park concert in October 1967, 50,000 fans packed in, causing chaos. A riot erupted after a few songs, injuring dozens as the crowd surged. Police shut it down when the stage nearly collapsed. The band barely escaped as frenzied fans overturned a limo and swarmed their car, forcing a wild getaway through Sydney's streets. With no songwriter and internal tensions rising, the Masters turned to Brian Cadd, who provided Silver People, later reworked into Elevator Driver, released in February 1968. Around this time, Peter Tilbrook joined on rhythm guitar, helping fill the gap left by Mick Bauer. However, the band continued to struggle with lineup instability. Drummer Steve Hopgood and guitarist Tony Summers were dropped, prompting Jim to rebuild the group. Colin "Doggy" Burgess replaced Hopgood, and Doug Ford, a skilled guitarist and songwriter, soon joined, revitalizing the band's sound. Ford's presence was crucial, his guitar work expanded their musical range, and his songwriting partnership with Jim provided much-needed original material. Elevator Driver became a top 10 hit, keeping the band's momentum going. In mid-1968, bassist Gavin Webb, the last remaining original Mustang, was forced to quit due to severe stomach ulcers. Jim first approached Beeb Birtles, from Zoot, but ultimately recruited Glenn Wheatley. Meanwhile, they entered Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds, winning the South Australian heats but again placing second in the national finals. Their last Astor single, Bridget, released in June, marked the debut of the Ford-Keays songwriting duo. The band also won Go Set's Most Original Group poll, but internal tensions remained. Manager Darryl Samble secured them a deal with EMI but prioritized Johnny Farnham, keeping the Masters at arm's length. Despite constant touring, they remained broke, barely seeing any of their earnings. In December, Tilbrook received an offer from Sweet Peach Records and left to form the duo Paradise. Wheatley moved to bass, finalizing the classic Masters lineup. Around the same time, the band discovered that Samble had bungled their Sitmar cruise opportunity, which could have taken them to England. By Christmas, morale hit rock bottom. Jim, Ford, and Burgess, completely broke, scrounged for food while Samble dined upstairs with industry elites. On New Year's Eve, between sets at their final gig of 1968, the band resolved to take control. They decided to part ways with Samble, with Wheatley handling bookings. With the lineup settled and the Ford and Keays songwriting partnership in full swing, the band entered its most successful phase. Their first EMI single, Linda Linda and Merry Go Round, in March 1969, marked the start of their collaboration with producer Howard Gable. The A-side catered to Darryl Samble's bubblegum vision, but the rockier B-side hinted at their true direction. It just missed the top 40 but put them back on the charts and airwaves. Constant touring tightened the band, while media coverage kept them in the spotlight. Concerned about overexposure, they even declined TV appearances. Yet their popularity soared. When they played the Moomba Pop concert that March, they drew nearly 200,000 people, second only to the Seekers' 1967 record. Musically, they took a major leap with 510 Man, in July 1969, a grittier, bluesy rocker aimed at shedding their bubblegum image. It kicked off a string of top 20 hits and cemented their heavier sound. That same month, they finished a close second in Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds behind Doug Parkinson in Focus, though Jim believed their bad boy image cost him the win. This reputation was fueled by press coverage, including the infamous Go Set article, "Sex is Thrust Upon Us," which Jim openly contributed to. Their first band house had already been dubbed Band Mole's Paradise, and the media hype only further distanced them from Samble's teeny bop branding. They also switched to leather stage outfits, not just for image but to cut costs, as leather proved far more durable than their previously shredded clothes. In August, they joined Operation Starlift, a massive national tour with top Aussie acts like Johnny Farnham, Russell Morris, and Zoot. Financially disastrous but a promotional success, the Brisbane Festival Hall gig saw them break the Beatles' 1964 attendance record. Glenn Wheatley was even torn off stage by fans. Police threatened to shut the show down for indecent exposure. Back in his hotel, Wheatley had a revelation. With 7,000 tickets sold at $5 each, the night grossed at least $30,000, yet the Masters earned just $200. Even Farnham, the top-billed act, likely made only $1,000. Realizing how badly they were being exploited, he resolved to take control. By late 1969, Wheatley had begun managing the band, strategically booking shows to boost demand and raise their fees. They closed the year with Think About Tomorrow Today, in December, a bluesy top 20 hit that reached #1 in Melbourne, setting the stage for their next move. In early 1970, Jim married his pregnant girlfriend Vicky in Plympton, South Australia, and they had a son James. Around the same time, the Masters officially parted ways with Daryl Samble, taking full control of their management and bookings, a move they quickly embraced, especially since they could finally keep more of their earnings. They launched their own booking agency, Drum, in January, led by Glenn Wheatley and Ada Barker. Despite resistance from Samble, they successfully took over their bookings and soon managed other acts like Tamam Shud, Jeff St. John, and Flying Circus. Wheatley, proving his knack for the business, was on a path that would define his career. In February, their long-delayed second album, Masterpiece, was released. A mix of singles and new material, it showcased the band's expanding range, linking songs with short guitar and string arrangements in a nod to concept albums. The title track, a live 12-bar instrumental, captured the energy of their late 60s shows. April brought their next single, and one of their best, Turn Up Your Radio. Recorded in a drunken late-night session, the track was designed to be as loud and rebellious as possible, burying their teen pop image for good. Despite limited radio play due to the 1970 radio ban, it soared to #7 on the charts. With their sights set on the UK, they had been saving up and embarked on a national farewell tour in April to May. It marked the end of an era, as the Melbourne pub rock boom was about to take over. Their passage to England came through Sitmar, which, unaware of past issues, offered him free passage aboard the Fair Sky in exchange for performances. On May 25, 1970, the Masters played their last Australian show before boarding the Fair Sky, with a rousing send-off from friends like Molly Meldrum and Johnny Young. The 6-week voyage was a welcome break, allowing them to write and rehearse new material. Their performances on board, however, dwindled as their jams proved too intense for the mostly middle-aged passengers. Arriving in London in early July, they initially stayed in Bayswater before moving to North Harrow with fellow Aussie travellers. Freed from constant gigging, they immersed themselves in London's music scene, shopping on King's Road, devouring new records, and frequenting clubs. Wheatley worked on a memoir, Who the Hell is Judy in Sydney, which later inspired his autobiography, Paper Paradise. Lacking gigs, they focused on securing a record deal. Wheatley approached Australian mogul Robert Stigwood but was met with indifference. Fortunately, Trudy Green, a young EMI staffer, championed them, convincing producer Jeff Jarrett to work with them. Soon, EMI Australia agreed to finance an album recorded at the legendary Abbey Road Studios. In September, they began recording choice cuts, reveling in the top-tier facilities. Their new material reflected diverse influences: Hendrix, Free, Donovan, and Van Morrison's Astral Weeks, with Because I Love You emerging as the standout track. They even used Paul McCartney's white grand piano and brushed shoulders with stars like Ringo Starr and the Moody Blues. When one more track was needed, they quickly crafted Rio de Camero, later released as a single. With the album completed in a month, the band was thrilled. A promotional clip for Because I Love You was filmed in Hampstead Heath, and the LP's cover, designed by Hypnosis, became iconic. However, by year's end, their finances were dire. With no support from EMI, they planned a return tour to fund their stay in London. Before leaving, they played one London gig at Blazers, but due to a double booking, they performed for just 50 people under the marquee of another band's name. Wheatley returned home first to organise the tour, even securing sponsorship from Marchant's Soft Drinks. Back in Australia by December 1970, they arrived just as Because I Love You was released. It became their fourth consecutive top 20 hit, reaching number 12, and remains a classic of Australian rock. The Masters returned to Australia and immediately embarked on a national tour. Their first show at Perth's Nickelodeon Theatre was recorded by Howard Gable for the live album Nickelodeon, released in June 1971. Despite being under-rehearsed, the LP remains an important document of the band's raw energy, with standout tracks like Future of Our Nation. Though voted Australia's top group in Go Set's poll, they struggled to reconnect with audiences after their time away. A breakthrough gig at Sydney's Checkers and a major Poll magazine profile helped rebuild momentum, but their return was marred by industry changes, including the 1970 radio ban. Meanwhile, EMI UK released choice cuts and the single, I'm Your Satisfier, earning acclaim and European success. However, stuck in Australia with little financial support, they considered disbanding. A lifeline came when EMI's John Halsall urged them to return to the UK, citing strong sales and press. Sit My Line provided another free voyage, and EMI promised a new album. Upon arrival though, they found industry interest fading. With no live work, they were approached by Bronze Records but hesitated due to EMI obligations. Glenn Wheatley attempted to renegotiate their deal, but EMI refused better terms, forcing them to stay put. In late 1971, they recorded a toast to Panama Red at Abbey Road with Sgt. Pepper's engineer Richard Lush. Though hailed as a progressive rock masterpiece, it was largely ignored, with EMI Australia offering no support. Tensions rose during sessions, with Wheatley absent on some tracks. Released in early 1972, the album and its single, Love Is, flopped in Australia, shunned by commercial radio. With no viable future, Wheatley quit for a management career, followed by Jim's departure. Doug Ford and Colin Burgess briefly continued with Colin's brother Denny before finally disbanding in mid-1972. Despite their struggles, A Toast to Panama Red remains a lost classic of Australian rock. After leaving the Masters Apprentices in early 1972, Jim returned to Australia, completing promotional duties for their single, Love Is, and founding the Rock On Agency. He compared both the Meadows Technicolor Fair and the Mulwala Festival, the latter marred by poor organisation. In 1973, Jim played The Lover in the Australian production of Tommy, with a Melbourne performance broadcast on HSV7. That year, he also wrote for Go Set as their London correspondent. In January 1974, he compared the Sunbury Pop Festival and oversaw the Masters Apprentices compilation Now That It's Over, designing its cover. Jim's debut solo album, Boy from the Stars, in 1974, was a sci-fi concept LP produced by Ian Miller, featuring notable musicians like Marcia Hines and Lobby Lloyd. While critical reception was mixed, McFarlane praised its craftsmanship. His single, Kids Blues, debuted in December, followed by a performance at Sunbury 1975 with the Jim Keays Band. He was one of the few Australian artists paid that year, as Deep Purple's hefty fee of $60,000 pushed organisers into liquidation. In 1975, Jim provided vocals for Steve Maxwell von Braun's Monster Planet, and released the anti-drug single, Give It Up. He formed Jim Keays' Southern Cross, releasing Undecided in December. In 1976, he co-produced Freeway's Riding High before forming the Manning Keays Band with Phil Manning in 1977. After leaving that project, he moved to the US for nearly 2 years. By 1978, he reassembled the Jim Keays Band, which evolved into the Keays in 1979. They released Red on the Meter in 1983, delayed due to a bandmate's illness. From 1983 to '87, Jim worked as a radio DJ and TV producer. In 1985, he and John Moon joined the Incredible Penguins for the charity single, Happy Christmas War Is Over, reaching number 10. In 1987, Jim signed with Virgin UK, recording a new version of Undecided with Sweet's Andy Scott. He reunited with the Masters Apprentices from 1987 onward. His 1993 album Pressure Makes Diamonds, which featured Waiting for the Big One, co-written with Frank Zablotny. In 1998, the Masters Apprentices were inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame. Jim wrote his memoir His Master's Voice in 1999 and later toured with Cotton, Keays and Morris alongside Daryl Cotton and Russell Morris. He appeared in the ABC TV series Long Way to the Top in 2001, which led to a national tour in 2002, where the Masters Apprentices briefly reunited. Jim continued touring and released Resonator in 2006 and Dirty Dirty in 2012. In May 2014, he performed at Melbourne's Crown Casino. Personally, Jim married twice. His first marriage to Vicky in early 1970 produced a son, James, before they separated in 1981. He later became a grandfather to James' son, Will. In the spring of 1989, he married Karen at Montsalvat, an artist colony near Melbourne. They had two daughters, Bonnie and Holly, and a son born on the 1st of November 2003, who sadly lived for only 6 hours. In 1984, Jim re-established contact with his biological mother, Nancy, born the 13th of June, and they remained in contact. In July 2007, Jim was diagnosed with myeloma, a type of blood cancer, leading to kidney failure. He underwent dialysis, chemotherapy, and stem cell transplants before returning to perform with Cotton, Keays and Morris. By February 2009, he was in remission. Sadly, on the 13th of June 2014, his mother's birthday, he passed away in a Melbourne hospital from pneumonia, a complication of his cancer. Though Jim Keays is no longer with us, his legacy lives on through his music and influence on generations of Australian artists. A fearless performer and songwriter, he never stopped evolving, right up until his passing in 2014, and is sorely missed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos just like this. Take care and bye for now.